The house was quiet, in the way only a house with a new baby could be. A silence so loaded, so alert, it almost had its own heartbeat. Clara sat in the worn rocking chair beside the crib, her feet bare against the cool wood floor, her hair pulled back in the kind of careless bun that had become her permanent hairstyle since Noah arrived 11 weeks ago. The nightlight cast a soft amber glow across the room, painting everything in warm gold: the white crib slats, the small stack of folded onesies on the dresser, the little mobile of felt stars and crescent moons that hung perfectly still above Noah's sleeping form. She had not meant to fall into this chair again tonight. She had planned, really planned, to go back to bed after the 2:30 feeding. Had even told herself as she lifted Noah from his crib that this would be the efficient feeding. Latch, burp, back down, back to sleep. 30 minutes max. She had said that to herself on Monday too, and last Thursday, and every night for the past 2 weeks that had dissolved into early mornings without her quite noticing. It was almost 4 now. Clara watched her son sleep, and she thought about the version of herself that had existed before him. That woman had had opinions about sleep schedules, had read 3 books on infant care during the 3rd trimester, had highlighted passages, had dog-eared pages. That woman had believed in the importance of putting babies down drowsy but awake. She had believed in a lot of things. Noah made a small sound, not quite a cry, something softer, like a sigh that didn't know what it wanted to be. And Clara's whole body tensed, every nerve awake in an instant. That was the thing nobody had told her about. Not the books, not her mother, not the women in the prenatal group who had offered their knowing smiles. Nobody had told her that motherhood would rewire her nervous system so completely that she would never again hear a small sound without her heart leaping into her throat, that she would develop a new kind of listening, ears that slept with one eye open, a body that never fully surrendered to rest. He settled. She exhaled. Outside the window, a car moved slowly down the empty street, its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling like a lighthouse beam. Clara watched it pass and thought, with a strange affection, that she had become fluent in the language of nighttime. She knew which floorboards creaked and which ones could be trusted. She knew that the refrigerator hummed in a different key after midnight. She knew that the neighborhood cats held their meetings somewhere near the back fence around 3 a.m., their voices low and conspiratorial. She had never known these things before Noah. She had slept through all of it. She shifted in the rocking chair, and the old wood offered its familiar protest. A soft creak that had become, in these weeks, as known to her as her own breathing. She had worried at first that the sound would wake him. It didn't. Noah slept like someone who had already made peace with the world, which Clara found remarkable, given that he had only been in it for 11 weeks. She remembered the night he was born with a clarity that felt almost violent in its precision. The way the hospital lights had been so aggressively bright after the quiet intimacy of labor. The way time had collapsed into something unrecognizable. The way the first cry had split the air and she had understood, in a way that bypassed language entirely, that everything was permanently different now. They had placed him on her chest, and he had stopped crying almost immediately, as if he had simply needed to announce himself and, having done so, was satisfied. His skin had been warm against hers. His fingers had been impossibly small, curled like fern fronds, like something just beginning to unfurl. She had looked at him and thought, I don't know you at all, and somehow that had been the most profound thing she had ever felt. Not fear, exactly, but a kind of awe so large it made the room feel small. 11 weeks later, she knew him. She knew the specific quality of his hungry cry versus his tired cry versus the cry that meant he was startled and needed the particular comfort of her voice saying his name softly, twice, close to his ear. She knew that he loved the sound of running water and would calm almost instantly when she turned on the bathroom tap. She knew that he had a preference, already at 11 weeks, an actual preference, for being held with his face turned slightly outward so he could see the room. She knew that he smelled different first thing in the morning than he did at night. Something sweeter at dawn, like warm bread, like something just risen. She knew these things, and yet she continued to feel, most days, like she was failing at the essential thing. The feeling was hard to name. It wasn't that she didn't love him. The love was enormous, oceanic, the kind of thing that could knock the breath out of her at unexpected moments, while she was folding laundry or washing bottles or simply looking at his face. It was more that the love felt so large, and she felt so small inside it, so uncertain of whether she was doing it right, whether she was enough, whether the hours she spent in this chair in the dark were something she should be doing more efficiently somehow. Her sister had called 3 days ago and asked how she was really doing, and Clara had said fine, good, tired, but good, and her sister had said that was normal, and Clara had nodded into the phone, and later, after they hung up, had sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried for reasons she couldn't entirely explain. Not grief, not regret. Something more like the feeling of carrying something precious and heavy for a very long time and not being entirely sure you were holding it correctly. Noah stirred again. This time his eyes opened. Those dark, still unfocused eyes that somehow managed to find her in the dim room, that managed to land on her face with an attention that felt, every single time, like something extraordinary. Clara leaned forward slightly in the chair, her elbows on her knees, and watched him look at her. At 11 weeks he was beginning to track movement, beginning to hold his gaze for longer stretches, and there were moments, more of them now, accumulating like evidence, when she felt quite certain that he recognized her specifically. Not just a warm presence, not just the smell of milk and safety, but her, Clara, his mother. He was awake now, fully awake, looking at her in the amber light with an expression that she could only describe as interested. His small mouth worked silently. His arms, free of the swaddle she had loosened during the feeding, moved in the slow, searching way of babies. Those movements that looked almost purposeful, and somehow were, in their own language. She reached into the crib and picked him up, more from instinct than necessity. He was not crying. He did not particularly need to be held in that moment, but her arms had already decided, and she gathered him against her chest and felt his weight settle against her with that specific rightness that she had come to understand as one of the truest physical sensations of her life. He made a small sound against her collarbone, a sound of acknowledgement, almost. She rested her cheek on the top of his head, and then he did the thing. It was not the first time he had done it. She had felt it before, briefly, in the half-awake blur of earlier feedings. But tonight, it was deliberate in a way she hadn't experienced before, a way that made her breath catch and her eyes go suddenly, unexpectedly wet. Noah lifted his hand, that small, improbable hand with its translucent nails and its soft, deep creases, and placed it against her chest, not grasping, not rooting, simply placing, his palm flat and warm just above her heart, as if he were taking attendance, as if he were confirming something he needed to know. He held it there. Clara went very still. The rocking chair stopped. The house held its breath. She thought of the books she had read, the chapters on infant development, the notes she had taken in the margins. She knew the clinical explanations, that babies this age were beginning to explore sensation, that they were mapping the boundaries of themselves against the world, that touch at this stage was fundamentally about discovery rather than communication. She knew all of that. And she also knew that her son had placed his hand over her heart, and she had felt it move through her like a cord, like something resolving. She thought, he knows I'm here. Not the generic presence of warmth and milk and safety. He knew her. He had put his hand over the place where she was most essentially herself, and he was saying something she had not known she needed to hear. Or not saying. Offering, maybe. offering the simplest possible proof that whatever she had been uncertain about in these 11 weeks, whatever she had worried she was failing to provide, had been received, had landed. A tear moved down her cheek. She didn't try to stop it. She thought about all the nights she had sat in this chair and wondered if she was doing enough. All the morning she had stood at the window with him while the light came in and questioned whether she was present enough, attentive enough, whatever the books meant when they said attuned. She had watched other mothers, at the pediatrician's office, in the park on the days she managed a walk, and seen in them something that looked like certainty, and had felt the gap between that certainty and the permanent state of not quite knowing that seemed to be her constant companion. But Noah had put his hand on her heart, and whatever that meant in the developmental literature, whatever its proper categorization, Clara understood it as an answer. Not a complete answer. She suspected parenthood would require the learning to sit comfortably with incomplete answers, with the permanent uncertainty of loving someone so much and being so inadequate to the size of it. But an answer, nevertheless. A small, warm hand that said, "I know you. You are the one. This is where I am." She sat with him for a long time after that, long past the point when she could have gone back to sleep. The neighborhood grew quieter and then began, very gradually, to wake. The first birds, tentative and singular. Then more of them. Then the distant sound of someone's alarm clock in a nearby house. Then the particular quality of pre-dawn light that she had come to think of as the world clearing its throat. Noah's hand eventually moved, as hands do. He brought it to his own mouth in the searching way of hungry babies, and she understood from this that the quiet interlude was ending. That morning had its own requirements, that there were bottles to prepare and a new day to negotiate. But before she rose, she held him for one more long moment and pressed her lips to the top of his head and thought, "I have been looking for reassurance in all the wrong places, in the books and the schedules and the careful comparisons, in the question of whether I am doing it correctly, when the answer was here all along, in 11 weeks of nights and mornings, in the specific knowledge of his cries and his smells and his preferences, in the fact that when his small hand needed to land on something certain, it found her. She was enough. She had always been enough. She had just needed him to tell her. She got up from the chair, the familiar creak, the familiar protest, and carried him to the kitchen where the pale light was beginning to fill the window above the sink, and she thought, "This is what it is. This ordinary, extraordinary, impossible, completely manageable thing. This is what it is to be someone's whole world, and to have them be yours." Outside, the first real light of morning arrived, gold and unhurried, laying itself across the kitchen floor like it had nowhere else to be. Noah watched it with his serious, wondering eyes. Clara watched him watch it. And the house, which had been holding its breath all night, finally exhaled.